Hello guys, I'm Tom, and today we will explore what the Dawn of the Dead virus is. Within the vast and turbulent universe of horror cinema, few zombie films have managed to leave such a deep, visceral, and lasting mark as Dawn of the Dead, directed by the bold and visionary Zack Snyder. This film is not simply a work of horror. It is a modern and bloody reinterpretation of George A. Romero's immortal classic, adapted for a contemporary audience, filled with pure tension, oppressive atmospheres, and a mythology as unsettling as it is carefully crafted. Thanks to this combination of elements, it has earned a privileged place as one of the most influential and admired films within the zombie genre. What makes Dawn of the Dead stand out is how it blends an apparently simple concept with unexpected narrative depth. The plot begins with a devastating premise. An unknown infection, of mysterious origin, spreads at a terrifying speed, transforming society without warning or time to react. Within days, and with virtually no official explanation, much of humanity falls victim to a chilling phenomenon, a lethal agent capable of resurrecting the dead, turning them into insatiable predators driven solely by a brutal instinct. The few survivors are thus dragged into a constant, merciless struggle against an enemy that never rests, never tires, and shows no mercy. Survival becomes a race against time, an endless battle to find shelter and maintain sanity, while relentless hordes of the living dead advance inexorably. But the threat goes beyond mere violence. The virus in question possesses disturbing and poorly understood characteristics, and the creatures it produces display an almost animal ferocity, accompanied by disturbingly coordinated behavior. For this reason, this analysis does not only narrate the story, it delves into the very nature of the phenomenon, exploring its possible origins, the way it affects the human body, the types of zombies that appear, and the peculiarities of their behavior, becoming a work rich in details that transcends the superficial. To better understand the scope of the catastrophe, it is necessary to return to the film's earliest moments. There we meet Anna, a nurse in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, who, after finishing her usual hospital routine, returns home unaware that her world is about to collapse. Everyday calm is abruptly shattered. The following morning, a terrifying event shakes her life. Her neighbor's daughter, already turned into a zombie, bursts into her home and attacks without mercy. This first encounter is not only a narrative adrenaline hit, but also a symbol of the sudden and relentless nature of the disaster. This opening episode reveals something fundamental. The plague does not develop gradually, but manifests explosively, without warning or opportunity to prepare. According to the film's narrative, by mid-2004, violent attacks and massive riots began to be reported in several U.S. cities, generating a climate of widespread panic that quickly spread to other parts of the world. On that same fateful day, at the hospital where Anna works, the situation becomes chaotic. The flow of injured patients multiplies at alarming levels. Ambulances arrive one after another, with victims suffering deep wounds, bites, and mutilations typical of desperate confrontations. Immersed in her medical routine, Anna does not initially comprehend the magnitude of what is happening. However, that day marks the true beginning of the catastrophe. It will soon be discovered that those who suffered bites did not die solely from their injuries, but returned to life as zombies. Within hours, the world begins to plunge into an unprecedented apocalypse. The uncertainty intensifies because even the media within the story cannot provide clear explanations. Theories multiply, from collective hysteria and uncontrolled scientific experiments to divine punishment or supernatural forces. This absence of answers creates a disturbing atmosphere, where paranoia and fear become forces as lethal as the zombies themselves. Zack Snyder amplifies this atmosphere of mystery with powerful religious and philosophical allusions. One of the most unsettling and memorable scenes occurs when a preacher, broadcast on television, claims that humanity has sinned so much that hell can no longer contain souls, and therefore the dead walk among the living. According to his words, the causes of the catastrophe would be extramarital sex, abortion, and moral corruption. This speech, charged with drama, culminates in a terrifying phrase that will be engraved in the memory of zombie film lovers. When there is no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth. This spiritual backdrop is further deepened later in a key dialogue between Kenneth, a police officer, and Andre, a gang member. Andre questions whether what happened could be the work of God, a sign of the apocalypse. Kenneth, though doubtful, admits that, from a religious perspective, what they are living through could be interpreted as the beginning of the end of the world as we know it. This debate adds a philosophical layer that turns Dawn of the Dead into something more than just a horror film. It becomes a reflection on fear, morality, the fragility of civilization, and the fate of humanity. In the opening minutes of Dawn of the Dead, Zack Snyder wastes no time establishing the tone of his narrative. He immerses us in a visual montage filled with narrative force and tension. This opening is not a simple introduction. It is a declaration of intent, a direct invitation to the chaos to come. Through a fictional news broadcast that combines documentary aesthetics with television realism, the viewer witnesses the first outbreaks of the global zombie epidemic. Snyder's choice is deliberate. This device serves a dual narrative function. On one hand, it delivers essential information. On the other, it creates an immediate atmosphere of urgency and dread. In these sequences, the central figure is the director of the Crisis Response Center, who appears on camera giving official statements. The tone of his words is grave, restrained, yet filled with unease. Journalists relentlessly question him. Is it a virus or a bacteria? How is it transmitted? Are we facing a medical problem or a crisis requiring military intervention? Tension rises when the most disturbing question is posed. Are the victims truly dead or still alive? The official's response is as unsettling as it is revealing. Aware of the gravity of the situation, he admits they do not possess absolute certainty about the nature of the outbreak. However, he maintains one unquestionable truth. They are facing a global epidemic, a phenomenon of catastrophic scope that represents a real danger and requires immediate military response. This initial statement plays a crucial role. It not only establishes the magnitude of the threat, but also prepares the viewer for a deeper and persistent question throughout the film. What is the true origin of this plague? Moreover, this opening leaves open the possibility of a supernatural dimension, almost as if the catastrophe were divine punishment. However, in Snyder's characteristic style, this dimension functions more as an aesthetic and symbolic device than as a literal explanation. The film is enriched with frequent Christian references, reflecting his interest in blending horror with moral symbolism. This nod becomes a deliberate homage to George A. Romero's original film. In an act of respect and connection, the preacher who appears on screen is played by the same actor who portrayed Peter in the 1978 version. A significant detail that underlines Snyder's commitment to the tradition of the genre. A close analysis of how the infection is triggered, the behavior of the living dead, and the ways they can be eliminated, whether by gunfire, fire, or decapitation, strongly points to a biological origin of the pathogen. This approach distinguishes Snyder's remake from other hybrid stories, such as Red Virus or The Strain, where the supernatural and the scientific intertwine until they become indistinguishable. Here, there is no vulnerability to religious symbols, amulets, or elements such as silver. Still, both in Snyder's work and in Romero's universe, the exact origin of the outbreak remains shrouded in an unsettling mystery. This enigma intensifies if we consider the Japanese version of the original 1978 film. known for introducing an alternative and fascinating explanation. The infection's origin would be extraterrestrial. According to that narrative, at the end of the 20th century, an ancient planet from a remote galaxy exploded, releasing fragments charged with unknown radiation. When these meteorites impacted Earth, those who came into contact with that energy suffered irreversible transformation, becoming zombies doomed to roam and attack the living. This hypothesis directly connects to Romero's initial premise in Night of the Living Dead, where the cause of the disaster was a space capsule that, upon re-entering Earth's atmosphere from Venus, released contaminated samples capable of awakening the dead. This parallel adds depth. Snyder is not only telling a contemporary story, but also engaging in a dialogue with the mythology of the genre. Adding all these elements together, and observing visual symbols, such as the first image of the remake, where a burning sun or planet transforms into an X-ray, intensifies the sense of uncertainty. The viewer is trapped in a constant question. Is this plague a biological phenomenon, divine punishment, or an inexplicable cosmic event? An even more unsettling detail is that not all the dead return to life as zombies. Only the infected do. And the most disturbing aspect, there is no direct relationship between moral evil and reanimation. Characters with a dark or criminal past, such as Andrew, who confesses to having murdered several people, or the selfish opportunist who appears in the story, do not necessarily undergo the transformation. This reinforces the atmosphere of mystery and forces the viewer to question the true nature of the epidemic. The lingering question in the air is disturbing. Is the plague a punishment, a failed experiment, or something far more incomprehensible? After an exhaustive analysis of the plot, the dialogues, and the clues that Dawn of the Dead leaves throughout its narrative, a powerful hypothesis emerges. One that has been gaining increasing traction among fans of the genre. The origin of the virus has an extraterrestrial nature. This concept resonates closely with what was suggested in the original 1978 version, and it is not simply an isolated speculation. It constitutes a deliberate link between both films, a key to understanding the background of the outbreak and its symbolism. Among the most passionate followers of the franchise, the idea circulates that the threat corresponds to the so-called Black Star virus, a fictional pathogen with incomprehensible properties, capable of spreading globally at a staggering speed and massively transforming human beings into the living dead. This theory not only provides a solid narrative framework, but also opens the door to philosophical and scientific reflections on the nature of life, death, and the universe itself. If we accept this hypothesis, we are not merely dealing with a pandemic. We are facing a cosmic event capable of radically altering the destiny of humanity. With this premise in mind, the next step is to unravel the peculiarities of this fictional pathogen, its mode of transmission, the physiological effects it provokes, and the way it irreversibly alters those who contract it. In Snyder's cinematic narrative, the virus is transmitted primarily through direct contact with bodily fluids, especially blood or saliva, from the infected. Bites or scratches are the main vector, although the film hints at the possibility of less obvious forms of contagion. This detail adds an additional layer of terror. It is not enough to avoid eye contact with the undead. Even the slightest accidental touch can trigger infection. Once transmission occurs, the infection can develop in two different ways, depending on the severity of the contact: slow or fast. The slow infection usually originates from a superficial scratch or minor contact with contaminated fluids. In these cases, the viral load is considerably lower, leading to a gradual process that may last for days or even weeks before culminating in biological death and subsequent reanimation as a zombie. This type of contagion has interesting narrative implications. During the incubation period, the victims experience progressive changes. such as loss of appetite, apathy, irritability, and confusion. These stages serve as a kind of prelude to the ultimate horror. The fast infection occurs when the bite is deep and direct, causing immediate bleeding. In this scenario, the victim exhibits acute symptoms: dizziness, confusion, extreme weakness, but curiously, no apparent fever. The process accelerates alarmingly. Within approximately 10 hours, the body enters a state of sepsis, a generalized toxic collapse that leads to death. Moments later, the virus reactivates the body's motor functions, transforming it into the living dead. This near-instantaneous process intensifies the terror, turning deep bites into an irreversible death sentence. Extreme cases have also been documented within the narrative, where transformation occurs almost instantly. This happens if the bite or wound is near the skull or brain, or if the victim loses consciousness quickly due to massive blood loss. Under such circumstances, conversion is sudden, almost mechanical, as if the virus had direct access to the central nervous system. This variant adds an unpredictable element. Even a brief encounter with a zombie can prove fatal within mere hours. The resulting undead possess uniquely disturbing traits within the fictional universe. One of their most surprising characteristics is the partial retention of memories from their former lives. This phenomenon, which could be described as residual memory, explains why they often gravitate toward familiar places, such as shopping malls, neighborhoods, or specific homes. Vivian, for instance, tirelessly seeks her husband Luis, and vaguely remembers that he used to visit a neighbor's house to skate. Another emblematic case is Andy, a zombie who uses his own blood to write messages on a chalkboard, replicating habits from his past life despite having lost much of his cognitive ability. These details add a chilling dimension to the horror. Zombies are not mere automatons, but distorted fragments of what were once human beings. It has even been speculated that this partial memory retention influences their behavior toward animals. For example, they do not attack dogs, or most of them, as demonstrated in the scene where a dog carries food and water to Andy in his gun shop. This fact raises questions about the selectivity of their predatory instinct. Among other traits, these undead possess surprising speed and exceptional endurance. They do not feel fatigue, seem immune to pain, and show no clear signs of exhaustion. This allows them to withstand gunfire, severe injuries, or blunt impacts without losing the ability to advance. While a small group may represent only a moderate threat, a coordinated horde becomes an almost unstoppable force, capable of overpowering even armored vehicles, as seen in key scenes of the film. Furthermore, they possess superhuman strength. They can easily overpower a grown adult, even though their bodies show evident signs of decay. This makes them not only fearsome enemies, but practically invincible without precise knowledge of their vulnerable point. A particularly chilling aspect is the effect of slow infection in pregnant women. Although the contagion progresses gradually, the fetus continues to develop until it too becomes infected. The result is a birth already doomed, a new zombie from the moment it enters the world. This element adds a profoundly disturbing and macabre layer, expanding the horror beyond the human body into the realm of life itself being perverted. It is worth noting that this virus does not affect animals. Unlike other fictional pathogens, such as the Alpha virus from Army of the Dead or the agent in Resident Evil. This is not just a narrative detail, but another clue for understanding its origin, reinforcing the extraterrestrial theory and setting this story apart from other conventional zombie tales. Finally, the film establishes unequivocally the ultimate method of eliminating zombies, destroying the brain with a gunshot, a blunt strike, or a precise stab. This act is not only a practical necessity within the plot, but also a fundamental rule that becomes a narrative dogma of the genre. The movie also makes it clear that incinerating their bodies is the safest way to prevent further spread of the infection, thus closing the circle of survival in a collapsed world.